So in January 1943, there was another meeting between Churchill and Roosevelt, and that was in Casablanca, the city that we saw the movie. Um, this was a significant meeting. Roosevelt and Churchill hoped that Stalin could be persuaded to meet them, but Stalin refused to go. He's just demanding second front, but he doesn't go himself. And were some significant outcomes of the Casablanca meeting. Churchill manages to put the brakes on the cross-channel invasion in 1943. Anyway, he convinces Roosevelt that it's much too soon to attack mainland Europe across the English Channel. The U-boat situation had not been solved yet. Merchant ships were still getting sunk at just alarming rates. The troop buildups in England had not really reached a sufficient level, the war material. So Churchill's very pleased, and he gets Roosevelt to agree to an invasion of Sicily after the victory in North Africa, and then from Sicily into Italy. And Churchill's happy because this fits into his kind of encirclement. He wants to have a ring around Germany instead of the cross-channel invasion. So he's very, very pleased because in the short term, the cross-channel invasion has been put off, and he's able to create a link in this chain or this ring around. Do you put a link in a ring? I don't know. Build the ring around Germany, which is his preferred way, to defeat the Nazis. Now, the problem with Churchill's idea, as I alluded to in an earlier podcast, the terrain of Europe. So he wants to create this ring through Italy, going up through Italy. And let's just talk about Italy for a second. The Italian campaign, which would happen in 1943, it was a really nasty campaign. We read about the death of Wascow. But the problem was the Germans held the high ground. Sicily was pretty easy to occupy, but Italy was a very, very different story. The Germans held the high ground as the Allies fought up the peninsula of Italy, the Italian peninsula. It's quite beautiful. It's fun to be a tourist there, bringing up Italy. But it's just horrific fighting. And Churchill never could see that the Germans, certainly the Germans were defeated, but they were really brilliant tacticians. And it was very bloody fighting moving up the Italian peninsula. But anyway, so let's go back to Casablanca. Churchill gets his wish. The cross-channel invasion is put off. Roosevelt agrees to an invasion of Sicily, which would then quickly be followed by an invasion of Italy. The other thing that happened at Casablanca is that Roosevelt announced almost kind of offhandedly that the Allies would only accept unconditional surrender of the Axis powers. This would have immense repercussions at the end of the war, especially in Japan. It really meant a fight to the finish. But it was politically very popular. Again, it's kind of something that, of course, it was inevitable that there would have been unconditional surrender. But once you look at the record more carefully, it wasn't inevitable. Roosevelt had probably been thinking about it, but he announces it to the press without telling Churchill and really without telling Congress. But Churchill doesn't really care because he has gotten his invasion of Sicily and then Italy, which is really all he cared about at Casablanca. Again, he's trying to delay the cross-channel invasion, or at least a year. So what happens is that the invasion of Italy occurs, Sicily and then Italy, and the Sicilian invasion goes very, very quickly. But then the invasion of Italy, which is just right off the strait of Messina, this was really a much tougher nut to crack, and it was very, very bloody, but again, the U.S. in some ways had to fight somewhere. Stalin, again, was demanding that there be a second front. He's getting very, very impatient. Think about the troop losses that Stalin is facing. Um, so North Africa kind of was a little bit of a sop to Stalin. And the Italian campaign, again, was the U.S. had to fight somewhere, and Churchill rather, was pushing for Sicily and Italy, and this is where we fought next. Italy again. It was a good target of opportunity. This is what Churchill wanted. The Americans had to fight somewhere, but again, Roosevelt, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they never are lose track of the big picture, which is the cross-channel invasion. They realize they're realistic. They realize there's just going to be a year delay. Churchill, though, is putting the brakes on it. He's hoping that he can undermine it and maybe stop it altogether. So this is becoming a growing source of tension between the Americans and Churchill. This idea of the cross-channel invasion and the reluctance of Churchill and the British military to move across the channel to go right directly into France and then into Germany. Now, the military operations of 1943 went pretty well. The Italian campaign wasn't the most successful. It wasn't the quickest campaign, but nonetheless, a good portion or a portion of the German army was forced to face the Allies on the Italian peninsula. But this preparation, this fight about the cross-channel invasion, it comes to a head in the fall of 1943. And what you had is there's just a rift between Churchill and Roosevelt. And there is a meeting at Tehran, which is in Iran, and Stalin is at this meeting. Stalin's at this meeting. So for the first time, Stalin, one of the big three, comes to a meeting, and Roosevelt kind of blows off Churchill in favor of meeting with Stalin. He meets with Stalin on his own without including Churchill, which I think was very embarrassing to Churchill. And what Churchill's starting to realize is that he's losing ground. Great Britain is losing ground. And when Stalin and Roosevelt meet, it becomes clear that there's a momentum that's gathering now for a cross-channel invasion, which would happen in the summer, May or June of 1944. Of course, we know it happened in June of 1944. So what's happening is Churchill had managed to put the brakes on the cross-channel invasion, but by the end of 43, it's becoming clear that the cross-channel invasion is going to happen whether Churchill wants it or not. So at Tehran, there's a fixed date that is set for the cross-channel invasion, May 1st, 1944. And in addition, and this is often forgotten, a couple of weeks after the landing at D-Day, the Allies were going to also land, which they ultimately did, at Marseille, which is in southern France. And that created another front that the Germans had to fight in France. So after D-Day, there's the D-Day invasion, and less famously, the Americans, many troops from Italy, are transferred into southern France at Marseille, and they head up north in France towards Germany. So Roosevelt is starting to lose the argument. He's very upset that troops have been pulled from Italy. He wants a focus from Italy, on Italy rather, but he just doesn't have the clout anymore that he once had, and Great Britain doesn't have the clout that it once had. And Roosevelt has realized that the cross-channel invasion has to happen. He has talked to Stalin about it, and Churchill, much to his displeasure, is losing the battle.